Hello everyone and welcome to another tutorial by Code by the Grace. In this tutorial we will be looking at loops. Okay, loops are very important for you. In Python has two main loops. They have the for loop and also the while loop. Okay, now the for loop is used when you want to repeat something a known number of times or each item in a list. Is when you know the number of times you want to actually repeat something. And the while loop is kind of similar, but while loop only works when the condition is true. So if the condition is true, it will repeat it. If the condition is false, it will not repeat what it needs to be do. So think of a while loop is when you want to repeat something a known number of times, and a for loop, while loop is when the condition is true. So now I'm going to show you the syntax for loop, and then we're going to move on to a while loop. So when it comes to for loops, this is how you write a for loop. For, okay, which is the start of the loop, and then I, it can be anything, I, X, J, Frank, Emmanuel, Kofi. That's basically the variable that takes the number each turn. Okay, so it takes each number in turn. What that basically means that at the current position of the loop, whatever is stored in there. And then we have a range, which usually talks about the numbers. For example, give me the numbers that I'm looping through, and then we can print something. So this is a basic example of what a loop is. So for I in range, okay, and then we will print out the current position or the current iteration of where our loop is. So if you look here, what we have here is if I run my code now, you would see iteration 0, iteration 1, 2, 3, and 4. So that is how you actually write a for loop. Now think of the range is as a helper that gives you a bunch of numbers for the loop to use. So in this particular example, we are telling the loop that, hey, I want to print out a loop, and the range of numbers that I need is 5. But remember that in loop and in programming, usually the positioning usually starts from the 0. So in this example, we will go from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 because it's 5. But the number 5 will never be printed because remember, we started from 0. So the range kind of means that give me numbers from 0 to 4, which of course is 5. And that helps us to be able to repeat the number of time, have a number to repeat our loop by. So that's why you can see here iteration 0, iteration 1, iteration 2, iteration 3, and iteration 4. And that is how you deal with for loops. Now, one thing that I want us to have a look at is the range. Okay, so the range has three common forms. Okay, so for example, it's the range has you can specify a starting point, and you can also specify an ending point, and you can also specify a stop point. So for example, if we wanted to do a for loop with range, where we actually specify the starting and the ending, we can do something like this. One would be where we're saying, okay, this is where we're starting from, and then we have the part where we want to actually end. So in this particular example, if I put 1 to 6 and I run my loop again, you would see that it started from 1. Okay, so you're basically telling it, okay, give me numbers 1 to basically 6 in a sense. What you have to understand is that when it comes to for loops and when you're using range actually never includes the last number that you put there. So you can see from this example that we've requested 1, 6. But for example, when it printed, it went to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But it never actually added 6 as part of it. Why? Because the 6 basically means stop at this particular number. So if I was to put 5 here, it will only go up to 1, 2, 3, 4. Now that is one form of how you can use the loop. So really, every time we just use one number, we are saying stop at 5. Every time we're using one and 6, we're also telling it, okay, I want you to start from 1, but stop at when it gets to 6. That means it doesn't include 6. And another part of it, which we sometimes use, is is usually referred to as a step. So the step at which you want the loop to run by. So let's say, for example, I am printing a loop from, I'm printing a range of numbers. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It will stop at 5 because our stop is at 6. If I wanted to go in twos, I would just put the number 2 here. That's what it's referred to as the step. So if you read here, it talks about how it has the step there. So when I run my for loop again, I will end up with 1, 3, and 5. And that is how you use a for loop with range. Now, let's move on to a while loop. Okay. So while loop kind of works as long as the condition is true. So in this particular example, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off with a count because the syntax for while loop is different from a for loop. So I'm going to start off with a count. And what I'm going to say is while, right, my count is less than 5, less or equals to 5, print out the current count, and then for each count, add +1 to it. So in this particular, what this code is doing is, it first starts off with, okay, my count is at 1. Okay, then it checks the loop before it runs. Is 1 less or equals to 5? Yes, 1 is less or equals to 5. So I'm going to print out 1. Then it adds 1 to the count. So now count becomes 2. Then it checks again. Is 2 less or equals to 5? Yes, it is. Then it prints out the 2. Then it adds a number 1 again to our count. So it will continuously to do this until our count no longer meets that condition, and then it stops. So what we will end up having is this. It prints out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now again, if you wanted to increase the number that you're adding to it, we can just change from 1 here to 2. Plus equals means count is basically equals count plus 1. Okay, so the short form of writing this code is where we just do count plus equals. Now let me add just 2 and then we can figure it out. So we end up with the same thing as we had for the range, 1, 3, and 5. Okay, so that is how you write a for loop. Now this will help you because let's say, for example, you wanted to check a condition before you run a loop, you can do this. Or let's say, for example, you wanted to print out 100, but you wanted to make sure that it stops exactly at 100, you can also do that. Now, I wanted to show you something as well. Okay, so within our for loop, one of the things that we can do is you can use a for loop to actually print out a list. Okay, so let's look at, for example, names equals, let's say I had a list of Kofi, Ama, Kwame. Let's say we had a list of Kofi, Ama, Kwame, Akosia, for example. Okay, and I wanted to print out my loop. What I would do is for name in names. Okay, so that's also another way of how you can actually print out a loop, because name represents, right, the current condition of where we currently are. Okay, and then names is actually this list. So what we'll end up is we'll end up with something like this. So what we're saying is, okay, loop through names, which is a list. So we already know the list is 0, 1, 2, 3. So names is actually representing the 3. And then what would happen is for each name, so it grabs each string from our list, and then what it will do, it will print out that particular name. And that is how you are able to work with loops and lists. And then I will see you in the next video.